Okay, I'm Mabrouq. I'm from the Maldives. I'm hoping that some of you know where that is. Most of you probably don't, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I'd like to generally talk about protesting, about activism, about speaking out. I'd like to talk about the 2 years I spent right before this, 2012 and 2013, doing nothing else but protesting. Maybe working part-time, but mainly protesting. But the question is, why did I waste those 2 years of my life? But more importantly, was it a waste? In many ways, I failed because I didn't get the outcome I wanted. I'd like to tell you about the story of what we did, but more importantly, how the outcome could have changed and how you could be active in changing that outcome in the future. So I'll start talking about Maldives a little bit. Most of you know Maldives as a beautiful island nation, over 2,000 islands, mostly known for tourism. We're also one of the smallest Commonwealth nations in the world. We have 400,000 people in total. That's not one city, not one town. The entire country is 400,000 people crossed over to 2,000 islands. Well, 400 of them where people live on. And it's also a Muslim country, but a deeply polarized Muslim country. The only religion in Maldives that's accepted by law is Islam. But there is a huge division between those who think that Islam should be a moderate religion and those who think that they need to go with extremist, radicalized views of Islam. And this is the heart of the political issue in Maldives, not only in Maldives, but also at the heart of political issues where there are in nascent democracies in countries like Thailand, in countries like Sri Lanka, in countries like Burma, where religious conflicts and extremism is always a part of the political issue. And I'll talk to you in a bit about why that matters in today's speech. First, I'd like to just give you a brief explanation of what you probably don't know about Maldives, because nobody really has to care about Maldivian politics, right? 400,000 people, smallest country almost in the world. Whatever happens there is probably not going to impact you. But I'd like to talk briefly about what has happened in Maldives over the last few years. A bunch of events led to 2005 reforms to the legalization of multi-party democracy in Maldives. And on this day, 9 years ago, the most important political party in Maldives was registered, MDP, the Maldivian Democratic Party. But in 2007, there were many political reforms. In 2008, we elected the guy you see on the right as the new president of Maldives. A London-educated, pro-democracy, fought for many years, was a brilliant man. To just summarize what he's done, we were in power, well, he was in power, and MDP was in government since that year until 2012, where he got toppled by a coup. During that time, we had started the first taxation program in Maldives. We had started trade liberalization, opened up the most amount of small and medium enterprises that had ever been opened up in Maldives over the past years. We started the first real public transportation system, both through the ocean, because we are a bunch of islands, and also land transportation. We started the first healthcare program. There was educational reforms that gave us the best educational results in GC O-level and A-level in just those 2 years. Environmental action, and this is something many of you might have known about. He was a big name at the Copenhagen summit, where this small guy from a small nation was making a big deal, forcing countries like America and China to sit on the negotiation table, and Maldives was at the forefront of those things. This is the changing moment in my life. I had already started studying political science because I was interested in the political developments in Maldives. And by 2012, I was in Indonesia doing some work. One fine morning, I wake up, I hear that there's a coup in Maldives, the government gets toppled down. And basically, over the years and overthinking, it summarizes down to, and at the risk of oversimplifying, to these things. Unhappy businessmen who didn't want to pay taxes, and small and medium enterprises rising. Businesses were unhappy. We had the previous dictator who dictated the country for 30 years wanting to come back. In fact, he is back, with his brother, younger brother being the president right now. Deep politicization of Islam, where newfound freedoms of being able to express religion, being able to express anything you want, allowed radical Islamic sheikhs and Islamic scholars to further divide the country in that sense and use Islam as a political tool. We further had the radicalization of nationalism. And the entire protest that led to the coup wasn't necessarily because it was supported by the majority of the people, but it generally ran on the lines of for the country, for religion. So these things led to a coup, and I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy because it was against the fundamental beliefs I had. Oh, that's me, by the way. I really like this photo because I'm just one guy and there are 6 policemen trying to catch me here. It's real. So I wasn't happy because of these things. Firstly, I was protesting on the streets. I went back to Maldives a few days later. I was protesting because of a moral principle, obviously, because I wanted a democratic government. It didn't matter to me if it was the guy I liked or guy I don't like. I just wanted to know that the person who was going to lead my country was going to be someone that the majority of the people agreed with. Secondly, I wanted to, as I said, avoid regret, but more importantly, for me and for many people who were protesting on the streets for 2 years, who've closed down businesses, who stopped their studies for 2 years, put many things on hold, was this fundamental belief that we were investing in our future. It may be for economics, might be because of your studies, might be for networking, might be for anything, but for many of us, it was for the fact that protesting for those 2 years, making sure that we have an elected government, was going to be a big investment in our future. And I'd like to point out to you that those 3 reasons, moral obligations, avoiding regret, and investing in a future, is why you do anything. Might be the reason why you protest in UK, might be the reason why you study, might be the reason why you go to work. This is the 3 fundamental motivating criteria, I think, for most of the decisions we make in our lives. And for us, it wasn't different. But I got a little more than that, and I'd like to share with you my experiences. Firstly, I got a lot of pepper spray on my face. Quick tip, if you get ever pepper sprayed on your face, use milk or Coca-Cola. It really gets rid of the pain. If it's tear gas, soak up a t-shirt or cloth in vinegar, put it on your face, deals with the problem. But more than that, I was able to find a lot of friends, a lot of people I wouldn't have met otherwise, people older than me, younger than me, people who were musicians, people who were photographers, people who were artists, people who were businessmen. It was a great way to network with people, but with the right people, the kind of people that cared about what they believed in, the kind of people who would come out to the streets to make sure that they were heard, the kind of genuine people that you would like to have as friends for your life. And those are the people that I continue to hang out with every time I go back home. But this was the outcome. We lost the election. After 2 years, we were able to pressure the government, well, the junta, to hold an election in which they canceled the election like 4 or 5 times. Every time we were winning, they'd cancel it. You had like policemen walking into the elections commission trying to stop elections while they were going on. After several rounds of intimidation, of interference by the Supreme Court, by the military, by the police, by other old guards that were part of the ex-dictator, we lost the election, and we faced it. We lost the election, though, after winning 48.61% as one single political party. All the other 4 or 5 parties joined together as a coalition were able to beat us in the last round of election. But we lost. And I don't regret it. But I do think that there are many things that you could do to change this situation. And part of that is about a collective effort from all of us. If you believe in something, you have to fight for it, not only in your own country, but around the world. Because that collective effort in promoting principles is absolutely necessary in a globalized world. Because without it, it will come back to you. It will hurt you, it will hurt your principles, and it will fail you in your own country as well, both with those principles and in ways that you don't see it happening. So yes, I'm saying that you should be active. When in a country like Maldives that is so small, protests happen, you should take them seriously. So the goal is, first, you want to monitor your diplomatic relations. You know how when we talk about economics, we're talking about this idea that we need to decide about our economic policies and how we will deal with other problems. The only cases in which you care about your foreign policy are almost always cases where your government is involved in something like war or harsh action against a country. When you talk about elections, you never consider the kind of line your government would take in principle against cases such as what's happening in Maldives or many other nascent democracies that are failing. But we also want to force preemptive pressure. You don't have to wait for thousands of people to die before you take action. These are serious ways in which I think you might be affected by what happens in our part of the world. First is organized crime and religious extremism. In Maldives, there were many pictures, many news articles about the Maldivian Minister of Tourism having connections. Some of you might have heard of them, the Arthur brothers, the Armenian, supposedly, brothers that were kicked out of Kenya for drug dealings, for having arms trading, and having mercenaries working with illegal governments in many ways that you couldn't imagine. We find cases in Maldives with like pellets of cocaine, of pellets of other kinds of drugs being washed to the shore. The kind of drugs that couldn't be consumed in Maldives, and that's the important part, because it becomes a trade route. I work in logistics, and I've personally been approached by people from countries like Philippines who'd like to smuggle guns through Maldives to other countries. Because whenever there is a state that is unreliable and failing, it becomes a hotbed for other countries or other rogue parties to use as a way to hide their own problems. You can look at the case of Burma, which was one of the biggest trade routes for heroin while the junta was in power. It's because it moves towards isolation. When you don't deal with those problems, when you have a government having a vested interest in staying in power without democratic platform, they usually move towards isolationism. In Maldives, you saw the same case, where the current government openly criticizes the Commonwealth and wanted to come out of it. You have the same government criticizing countries like India, and they've pulled out of some of the biggest trade dealings we've had in the past few years on the grounds that they believe that these trade dealings should go to Maldivians who weren't able to get into those dealings in the first place. But nationalism and isolationism becomes part of it, because once you get criticized as a non-democratic government, the only tool you have is to make them your enemy. And that is a big problem. Unreliable partners. Now, you see the case of Somalia and how that's going to affect you, global trade. Almost all the ships that pass through the north that come into Asia, or go the other way around, from China to, say, Europe, or go to the United States, now pays premium prices for insurance and longer routes of transportation because of the instability in Somalia. And you're going to see similar cases in Maldives, but that's not the point. Even when you look at countries like Thailand, where you see big problems of human trafficking, of drug dealings, of drug trafficking, it's because those governments have failed. And it hurts you because we live in a globalized world. Your goods don't come from close neighbors anymore. They come from China, they come from Thailand, they come from Asia, and Asians buy stuff from Europe, from US all the time. It costs us money. The reason why we support diplomacy in most parts of the world is because it will help us. But to cut it very short, there are three key realizations you have to have. In countries with coups, and you don't have to read all of that, coups are repetitive. You cannot look at that as a one-time thing. In Thailand, you've had 22. In Argentina, back then, you had 7 coups. In countries like Afghanistan, you've had 12. In Pakistan, you've had, I think, around 6 or 7 coups. In these countries, the reasons why coups happen over and over again is because they start failing. Those governments who come into power through coup d'etats or through non-democratic means make sure they can come back into power even if there was a revolution. They pay corrupt military men to stay in the military. They train people specifically to be loyal to their cause. They find ways that they can lead that are all the other ways apart from through a vote. And that becomes incredibly dangerous. Secondly, activism in these countries, because of that, is very dangerous. Every day I was on the street, luckily nothing big happened to me, but it was a day that I couldn't be beaten up. I could be put into jail, I could be tortured. It's happened to many of my friends. And the third thing you have to realize is that once those governments come into power, there is serious media censorship. And there is a huge scenario in all these countries of intimidation. So a lot of the information after they come into power, after a coup, gets hidden, and you don't get to hear about it. It's usually too late to do something about it right after coups because you don't know the real situation in those countries. And either way, they've militarized themselves, they're powerful, it's harder to get them out from place. So why do your actions matter? Because protests, like I said, in these parts of the world are a big deal. We can't go out and protest just because we want to, like you can in many other countries. You're so much more blessed like that than we are. Going onto the streets to protest for me means that I'm risking going to jail, means that I'm risking getting tortured, means in many cases risking that I might die. So I don't go out and protest unless there are serious convictions. And you must look at them seriously. The minute that protests start in a country is the minute you need to start reading up about what's happening in those countries. Now, I'm not saying that you could change those situations. I'm not saying that you being active almost definitely means that the situation will change. I'm not saying that you need to agree with me on all these things neither. But what I am saying is that if you have principles that matter to you, if you have things that you need to see or you want to see in the world, you need to become active not only in your own country but around the world, because if you don't, most likely those same principles will be hurt. And it will affect you later on in life. And what I want you to take back from this is if you care about how your government spend money on things like diplomacy, if you care about how much money your governments waste on things like war, or the amount of money your governments have to give as aid that is unsuccessful, it starts at an earlier point. You don't deal with problems once they've become big enough to kill a lot of people. You start looking at problems when they start. And I think activism or protesting in developing countries or nascent democracies is a good trigger point for you to start thinking about how you deal with those countries. Because most likely it will be more effective, it's more likely to be helpful, it's more likely to help you at the end of the day. Thank you.